Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, second, third, fourth, I don't know what part thereof today, but it is a part. We're going to discuss military news, military aid and equipment with regard to Ukraine and to some degree Russia for the 11th of July 2024. Just a bit of housekeeping. I am insanely busy at the moment with regard to everything, producing the content and just the news landscape at the moment is so full. There's election after election. There's elections upcoming in November in the US that are still so far away, but filling up the news. The NATO summit is just causing all sorts of nuggets to be thrown out all the time, and I'm trying to pick up all the pieces and deliver them to you. I know there are a gazillion messages I have not replied to with regard to people, friends on Twitter, and you guys on Twitter and on Discord. I haven't looked at Discord for like a week, and emails, and just I will try and communicate with those who I owe replies to at some point. It will happen. It can be a struggle. Anyway, and of course, well, not of course, but we are going to be starting a NATO campaign pretty soon. JR, thankfully, thank goodness, thank the cosmos that JR exists, as he is spearheading that one, and I have a lot to thank that man for. Okay, right, let's start with the military aid segment, and as mentioned, there's quite a lot to go through. Okay, first of all, obviously NATO, the summit is 75th anniversary summit is taking place, and NATO countries have agreed to provide 40 billion euros worth of aid. So it's probably about $43 billion worth of aid in 2025. That's not above what people are doing. I think that is just a case of rounding up all the NATO members, many of which are in Europe. And we're promising to give you this amount, and that will be out, Germany's contributions will tot up to that. This is an over and above bilateral contributions. It includes that, but still, it gives you a kind of ballpark figure for the amount of support that Ukraine will get militarily. That has been stated in the declaration of the Washington summit. Of course, that's just from NATO countries. Allies plan to make proportional contributions totaling to at least $40 billion over the next year, and to provide a sustainable level of security support for Ukraine's victory. Now, that I think is good news in terms of for example, American election that is coming out, the presidential election, because that is an agreement with NATO. And even if there is the election of, say, Donald Trump, and he's a not big fan of giving aid to Ukraine, I'm pretty sure he would be beholden to that. I wonder how legally binding that would be. Okay, what else? Well, profits from the Russian frozen assets will be directed to the defense needs of Ukraine. The total amount will be 2.5 to 3 billion euros annually, according to their MOD. The first tranche of that, I thought the first tranche had already gone, but apparently it's now going to be at the beginning of August. 1.4 to 1.5 billion euros will be made available there, which is approaching $2 billion, and that will be only a few weeks away, so it's not like hugely far away, and I guess they would really want that. That will be put towards things like ammunition, air defense ammunition and systems, and so on and so forth. We have, and I was contacted actually by French aid to Ukraine on my messages to say, because I talked about what was it? He said, I saw that I was on your video. I just want to point something out. Basically, Sébastien Lecornu threatened or blackmailed MBDA to speed up the production of Aster-30 missiles for the SAMP-T. So Sébastien Lecornu is the French defense minister who appears to still be in position, even after the parliamentary shenanigans that have just gone on. He is over at the NATO summit at the moment, or has been. The 200 missiles scheduled for delivery in 2026 would now be delivered this year. So it seems like he's used some leverage, some governmental leverage, to get those Aster missiles there fired from the SAMP-T. In 2025, MBDA will deliver 1,200 Aster missiles. Indeed, what he says here, French aid to Ukraine, the delivery of the French-Italian SAMP-T system. So remember, there's one, out of NATO summit came this declaration that 5 systems are going to go, 4 Patriot systems and 1 SAMP-T from Italy. And here we have the delivery of the French-Italian anti-system under the German immediate action on air defence initiative is likely to coincide with the delivery of a new batch of Aster-30 missiles that can obviously be fired out of that. A reduced schedule for delivery to the French Armed Forces in 2026. And then the Minister of Armed Forces has threatened to use the new police powers to speed up delivery on time. So it's not just leverage, actually. If you remember, I reported some time back that the French government, or Emmanuel Macron, put in place an element of the war economy in certain areas so that he could, if wanted, or the government could, if wanted, force production to take place at any given rate, or force the defence industry to do the bidding of the government. Particularly, it appears in very narrow areas such as the manufacture of these missiles and air defence systems and whatnot. So they appear to have really put the foot down on the French military-industrial complex, and that has had an effect. As a result, the batch of 200 Aster missiles scheduled for delivery in 2026 will get there this year. So interesting, good stuff. Right. So German aid to Ukraine says Norway is increasing its contribution to the German IAAD initiative, and in cooperation with Germany will deliver an IRIS-T SLM fire unit to Ukraine this autumn. Additional funds totaling 1 billion Norwegian kroner will be made available for this purpose. And I presume that that's the announcement today that Norway is allocating almost $93 million to strengthen Ukraine's air defence, according to their prime minister. I think that could be this, rather than being two separate things. Thank you, Norway. However, says German aid to Ukraine, I would like to point out that this is not an additional commitment to Ukraine, as Germany would have supplied the RST SLM fire unit anyway. The only positive effect for Germany is that it now has several dozens of millions of euros for new procurements, since it doesn't have to finance a full fire unit on its own. So Germany was going to finance this fire unit, give it to Ukraine. Norway's come in and said, no, we'll do that. So Germany can now spend their money elsewhere. And one hopes that that will still continue to go to Ukraine, right? Okay. Then we're going to get to Britain. So we have had Keir Starmer meeting with Zelensky. This took place yesterday, and nothing I haven't particularly already told you, but it's nice to see them in person. This is about the use of Storm Shadow missiles. So there's still lots to talk about exactly what it meant. And Michael Weiss here saying, the key sentence is this, quote, today we had the opportunity to discuss the practical implementation of this decision. Sunak, the previous Prime Minister, had made similar noises about using Storm Shadows in Russia. But if Starmer is laying out specifics, we could soon see UK cruise missiles hitting targets soon. And of course, Zelensky seems to have taken this on by saying, I thank the Prime Minister for all UK's military and financial assistance provided to our country. This morning I learned about the permission to use Storm Shadow missiles against military targets in Russian territory. Today we had the opportunity to discuss the practical implementation of this decision. So it appears that Zelensky is on board with that. And if he's the one that's misunderstanding it, then, things have gone a bit south. We'll actually, let's listen to this video.
How are you? Very glad to be meeting you.
Glad to meet you too.
Bit of a hug.
Good to see you in person as Prime Minister. I've seen you as Leader of the Opposition, especially as Leader of the Opposition, but to come as Prime Minister is really important to me, and to be able to have this early opportunity to say again that, as you know from the get-go, there is no reduction in our support for Ukraine.
I heard, and so all the messages from your government and team and from people in United Kingdom, we are very thankful for your words and steps, which were important. Thank you that you are with us from the very beginning of the war.
So no reduction in support, as said there by the Prime Minister. Now, Colby Babwa says this permission has existed for quite some time. The problem is, as Zelensky himself has stated, President Biden has directed Ukraine not to use any long-range weapons to strike deep into Russia. So it could be that, the UK has given all this permission. Fantastic, good news. But the reality is that they still can't use those Storm Shadows to hit those deep Russian positions because the US is not allowing them to. You might say, well, what right do the US have over other countries' weaponry? But then if the US say, we don't have a right, we can't stop you using that, but only if you do use that deep into Russian territory, we won't give you further X, Y, Z. And so, okay, it's Hobson's choice. Okay, well, we can use that. but the ramifications are too serious for us to do so. Michael Weiss is talking about, well, okay, let's start with this from, this is Edgars Rinkovic, who is the Latvian president, and he is saying, look, there is a debate in the US, and this is espoused by Trump and his followers, that the US are doing a lot to support Ukraine and Europe is not doing enough. If you look at the figures, it's actually a different picture. Europe is doing more than the US. We are taking security and defense seriously. And he's correct, right? The stats are there for you to see. Europe is doing more by quite a large margin than the US. And you might say, yeah, fair enough. And that's good and proper that Europe do so. And this isn't a kind of competition like that. All I'm saying, and as Rinkovic there is saying, look, if you are someone who is proposing this argument in the US for whatever political gain, it's just wrong. It's like empirically wrong. So, stop it. Michael Weiss goes on to say from a European point of view, from a kind of British point of view, Europe agreed to send the first main battle tanks, Challengers, first cruise missiles, Storm Shadow Scalp, and the first AWACS. So Sweden, they're sending those AWACS, and they will be super important. And they haven't actually arrived there yet. I presume the Ukrainians will be being trained on that. That's obviously it's a whole new system, right? So those big radar planes, two of them from Sweden, that don't have the circular one. They have two bars kind of going the length of the fuselage type thing of the plane, and that gives you, it's not perfectly 360, but it's pretty decent radar coverage each side. We've got two of those planes, will be super useful, but it might take some time for them to get to Ukraine so that the crew have the skills. It's obviously going to be very important for them to be operational with the F-16s as well. Now, it also loosened, says Michael Weiss, about the European provision, restrictions on the use of Western weapons inside Russia before the US did. So, yeah, there are these arguments. And again, it's not a competition, but it's kind of like, let's at least put to bed these disinformative claims from certain people. Right, Speaker Mike Johnson, not someone I'm usually a big fan of for lots of political and indeed philosophical reasons, but he here is saying the right thing. Speaker Mike Johnson was asked his opinion on lifting restrictions from the Ukrainian army for long-range strikes into Russian territory, and this is what he says.
Have you been talking about lifting restrictions from Ukrainian army?
Did we talk about that?
Yes.
Outside the stanchions.
I explained that the will of Congress is, let her trip. The will of the Congress was to allow them the flexibility to use the weapons and assistance that were sent to prosecute the war as they see fit. So I'm a supporter of that. I believe that's what Congress intended.
So Congress intended that they use those weapons as they see fit, and that's what he supports. And good stuff there. That is exactly right. It seems to be the Biden administration that's hanging back on that. Yeah, we'll have to wait to see if that changes at all. Okay, here we have the UK-led drone coalition, a common fund enabling joint procurement for rapid and efficient drone deliveries. Has seen Netherlands, UK, Latvia. It's UK-led, but also Latvian. Let's not forget that, I think. New Zealand and Sweden have pledged in total over 45 million euros into the common fund, with additional contributions anticipated. And indeed, it looks like not only is that 45 million euros being made available, and it may increase according to the UK government, but additionally the Netherlands is allocating 20 million euros to Ukraine for the purchase of 1 million FPV drones. Now, 20 million euros won't get you 1 million FPV drones. Oh, that's for sure. I presume that is that an extra 20 million euros into that fund to make it 65 million? Not quite sure what the exact details there are there. The Ukrainian Review says the Netherlands will contribute 20 million euros to the joint fund for the coalition, the production of attack drones for Ukraine, according to the MOD in Netherlands. So, yeah, the idea is that they are going to be whatever the number is, they're just going to be providing a lot of drones. And that's really good news that there are still contributions coming in from them. Canada pledges 500 million Canadian dollars, so that's about 350 million US dollars, in military aid to Ukraine. Justin Trudeau announced that package during a NATO summit meeting with Zelensky, and the support includes defense equipment, medical aid, and potential pilot training, which is interesting. We'll come to that a little bit later. Lithuania has handed over a new batch of military aid to Ukraine as well, according to the country's MOD. The agency noted that Ukrainian armed forces received anti-drone equipment, 45 by 5.56 millimeter caliber cartridges and folding beds. It all helps. Thank you to them. And US will allocate more than $7 million to support women in the armed forces of Ukraine, according to Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The aid in particular will include more than 10,000 uniforms, shoes, and other necessary equipment. This is really good news because Ukraine need to be able to get as many boots on the ground as possible, and women are going to be a super important part of that. Now, you don't want to take the primary caregivers away from children in the country, but there will be a lot of women who will be in a position to be able to help the armed forces of Ukraine, either in a fighting capacity or in all the many other capacities there are. That's really important. It's really important that Ukraine use that resource, but also there are the complaints that the military equipment doesn't fit them. It's not designed for women. This has been a problem over the years. Has been equipment has been adapted for women over time. But here we have the US specifically getting involved to that effect. Geopol, the Ukrainian government military concern, and the American arms company Northrop Grumman, concluded an agreement on the creation of new production of medium caliber ammunition that will meet NATO standards. In June, one of the company's executives, Dave Bartel, announced the intention of Northrop Grumman to open an ammunition production facility in Ukraine. Initially, it's planned to manufacture ammunition for automatic guns of caliber, or lots of different calibers there, with further expansion of production. Good news. And indeed, on that note of indigenous manufacturing in Ukraine is to receive 18 Denmark-funded Bogdana artillery units. So these self-propelled howitzers that the Ukrainians are producing themselves, and they've ramped up production. They've gone from just a couple of prototypes in use to now producing, what is it they were looking at doing? Is it 12 a month or something? Anyway, 18 of these will have been funded within months, according to Denmark. So that's brilliant from the Danish. Denmark has joined a multinational collaboration to enhance space-based surveillance and intelligence, with Defence Minister Troels Lund Poulsen signing the agreement at the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. Poulsen also initiated direct cooperation with Ukraine to place orders with the Ukrainian defence industry, aiming to provide faster and more effective military support. Denmark's first donation, as mentioned, of 18 Ukrainian-produced Bogdana artillery pieces is due to come in the coming months. And then the war in Ukraine shows that the long-range strike is a key issue for Europe's defence. According to Sébastien Lecornu, the French defence minister, at the NATO summit in Washington, we signed a memorandum of understanding to initiate cooperation in this area, mobilising our European defence industries. I think you are going to see more and more of this kind of announcement, whereby NATO is future-proofing in the event that the US, for example, start pulling back from NATO, even though it's kind of their baby. If the US goes isolationist post-November 2024, the NATO need to have future-proofed themselves, and that means sorting out defense industries ahead of that. Now, the issue for the US, like, Trump might be a big fan of, say, isolationism and pulling the US out of that, but as I've said many times before, that comes at a cost, literally a cost, in terms of, well, if the EU or other nations have to fulfill the US's role in NATO, then they're going to say, well, screw you, the US, we're going to buy our own stuff as well. If you expect us to do all the work for NATO, then we'll also buy all the stuff off ourselves rather than you, and that will affect the US's bottom line, I'm pretty sure. Now, talking of the military-industrial complex, some fairly breaking news just out that, as Shashank Joshi says, referring to CNN, this is very serious. Quote, US intelligence discovered earlier this year that the Russian government planned to assassinate Armin Papiga, CEO of Rheinmetall, a German arms firm active in Ukraine, according to 5 US and Western officials. Quote, the plot was one of a series of Russian plans to assassinate defense industry executives across Europe who were supporting Ukraine's war effort, these sources said. The plan to kill Armin Papiga was the most mature. The question when we hear about all of these things is, well, okay, what do we do about that? It's this kind of hybrid warfare thing where, like, cyber warfare, we're like, oh god, this is just what the Russians do. Let's not react to that, or it's just what the Russians do. Here we've got a credible plan to assassinate a very important member, you could say, of the European larger community, but a in this case German national, and one would presume on German land, and this requires some serious words with, more than just serious words with Russia. Like, do we just go, well, there you go, that's part of war? Or do we say, hang on, that is really serious and that is escalatory. Stop drawing these red lines for us that we can't go over. Oh, we can't send, Ukraine can't send weapons into Russia, even though Russia can send missiles into Ukraine, right? But we're going to put these arbitrary rules in place for Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia go around the world attempting to assassinate all and sundry. It's just, it's incredible. I would really like to know that there will be some ramifications to that for Russia. Several thousand people have already signed up for the Ukrainian Legion in Poland, according to Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski. Quote, several thousand have already registered for this draft, and what is interesting is that many of them really want to serve and rotate their compatriots, but they say, we don't want to be sent into combat without being properly trained and equipped, Polish minister said during a NATO forum in Washington. According to him, Ukrainians mobilised to the Legion will be able to return to Poland after the rotation. This is really good. This is like Poland doing something that's actually meaningfully useful for, not that anything else they do isn't, but one of the biggest needs for Ukraine are boots on the ground. Another big need is being adequately trained. And if Poland can say, look, we're going to really train these troops excellently, and it might take us quite a bit of time to train them because we're going to train them really well. But these are people you wouldn't have got otherwise. Like, there was no realistic way of these guys ending up being on the front lines in Ukraine. Now we've done this. These are extras, if you like, and you will get them, but you will get them when they are properly trained, and that'd be great. He said every European country did this. Ukraine would have several brigades. The minister said, "Good, just a really good idea." Mobilizia channel says that Russians started putting QR codes with links to the army recruitment center on utility bills in Khabarovsk. You get a utility bill and at the same time an invitation to go and die in Ukraine if you're struggling with paying. Before you open your mouth about how the world hates Russians, recognize that Russia hates Russians even more, says Dmitry from War Translated. Ouch. And then he shows you some of these examples of these utility bills. And there's another scheme here. So Tatarstan authorities are promising to pay locals $1,000 for each person they persuade to go to war against Ukraine. Wow, I don't know how you prove that, but goodness me. Both of these things, if true, and no reason to disbelieve them, again, the question is this what you'd expect if everything is going well for Russia? Is this what you would expect if Russia didn't have any mobilization issues? And of course, the answer is, well, no, you wouldn't expect it unless things were desperate. So as desperate as they are for Ukraine, remember, like they are too for Russia. That is, I think, amply evident. So moving on to us, just because I had too many tabs open. So moving on to just air support and whatnot. So Norway's decided to donate 6 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, which I reported yesterday. I just wanted to remind people, with the delivery starting this year, Norwegian Prime Minister said in a press release yesterday, thank you Norway, says Anton Gerashchenko, quote, Ukraine's ability to defend itself against air attacks is crucial in its battle against Russia. Norway has now decided to donate 6 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. We plan to start delivery in 2024. Right, okay. Then we have this from Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister, saying Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba stated that the promise of having F-16s in Ukrainian skies by summer 2024 has been fulfilled. Quote, I can't share the route of the F-16 planes, but when we see them in the Ukrainian sky, I think all the questions will be answered. We are also already working on the increase in the number of F-16s that will be handed over to Ukraine, he added. Now, I know that many people are saying, oh, we've always had this, they'll be ready by then, but I think officially speaking, they were saying summer. I think it's probably a lot of other people who were chipping in. I don't know for sure, maybe other people said spring. But you know, it does appear that summer was a claim, and they are going to be, it appears, believe it when I see it type thing, maybe, but it does appear that they will be in the Ukrainian skies over summer, and that's good news. Now, the question is, well, what F-16s? Without getting too much into the details, the nitty-gritty of these F-16s, I'm going to read out a comment from John Oliver, who has commented here, and thank you, John, for doing this research. Now, I'm just going to read it out, take it with a pinch of salt, because, you know, how do we know this is all true, etc., etc., etc. Thanks to John for doing this research. I'm not going to explain much of it either. I'm just going to go through it. So I've been doing some research on these jets coming from other countries. The Norwegian F-16s are Block 15 with MLU, so that's midlife update. So they have been they at certain points. So what you do with planes or any kind of weaponry is you say, right, either these are now obsolete and we're going to get rid of them, replace them, either build new ones of the same or replace them with a different type of weapon, airplane, whatever. Or we give them midlife updates where at a certain point we say, right, we're going to upgrade that so it can still be used, it still has life in it, so on and so forth. And that happens to planes, and they get updated bits and pieces. So they have, but they're like, the airframe itself is pretty old. So they have an AN APG-66, which gives capability to fire AIM-9, AIM-120A, so these are air-to-air missiles, and have a detection maximum range of 150 kilometers or 80 nautical miles. 150 kilometers is pretty good. I still think that's under what the Russians have, but it depends, because there are advantages. So there are Russian ranges on missiles, but then radar range might be different. But then the missiles also might be different. Like they might not be so good in their terminal phase or whatever. So there's lots of ups and downs and variables. It's not just a case of comparing 1 kilometer to the other kilometer type thing, is what I'm saying. Most of these fighters are AD role fighters, so air defense. Search and destroy air defense, shoot down incoming missiles and drones, not designed for air-to-air roles, but capable, though will be far outrange. So you can't expect these to shoot down loads of Russian planes, but that's not really going to be their role. They're going to be shooting down missiles and drones and maybe striking at ground targets. Netherlands should have the best F-16s of any country outside the US because they have a factory that has built nearly 1,000 of them. Well, I say that, but their official Air Force page says they operate the F-16AB Block 20 MLU. According to a press release, the F-16s that they sent to Romania to train Ukrainian pilots are F-16B 20 MLU, but upgraded on the same level as Block 50-52 as far as capabilities. You can go and look up all of that. If that is true, then Block 50-52 has the AN APG-66V 2A radar that can conduct air combat at ranges of over 100 kilometers, same as other but wider variety of precision munitions and new computer, new electronic warfare capabilities. The big difference between the Block 20 MLU and the actual production Block 50-52 is the V5 radar, detection at 80 miles, tracking at 70, but gives a better and faster detection field. 120 degrees over 20 by 20. The Danish ones are Block 52, upgraded engines, same radars, but with V7 and V8 upgrade capability. Can fire AIM-120s. It doesn't specify what variant, but also JDAMs, Mavericks, and JSOW, as well as Harpoon anti-ship missiles, but only in line of sight. So lots of information there. For some of you who know what that means, good stuff. Thank you, John, for putting in that time and then putting that all onto a comment in YouTube. Really appreciate it. Canada plans to commit over 500 million Canadian dollars, as we heard. But just to remind you, part that is that they will expand its training of Ukrainian pilots. Now, I wasn't aware that Canada was training F-16 pilots, but then of course you're training in Romania, in Denmark, and in the US, and it could be that actually Canadian trainers are involved in that. And if you're expanding these training programs, such as say in Arizona, where they were training 12 and there's been calls for them to expand that, you might need, you probably don't have enough American pilots to be able to do that who are qualified to train F-16 pilots. This is a very particular thing, and it's all about obviously health and safety and proficiency, and they have to be training all of these pilots from all around the world, and they've got very strict scheduling that needs to be organized like years in advance. You can't just go, this month we're going to have 24 trainers in pilots in this group instead of 12. There isn't a capacity to do that. And there are these complaints about the US not having enough spaces for pilots, as if it was a really easy thing to do. And I spent many days in a row saying, actually, this isn't the fault of the Biden administration. It's if you like, it's a fault of the US Air Force. But actually, even then, it's understandable that you don't have that. You can't magic up the capacity. It takes an awful lot of infrastructure, personnel, and training airframes and all sorts. And so this has happened in 3 different places, but there needs to be more capacity for training. And so Canadian extra training from Canada for pilots might well just be these trainers going to other countries, Romania, Denmark, the US, to help with that. Stockholm is open to providing Ukraine with Gripen fighter jets after the F-16 program is completed, but further steps depend on Kyiv. Swedish Foreign Minister Tobias Billström told Voice of America. So the idea was, do I have any more? No, there was some others. I haven't got them here. Might be some more details in Kyiv Independent article here. So the idea was that they stopped this on the behest of, some were saying behest of the people providing F-16s, some saying that it was actually the Ukrainians who said, actually, no, we can only concentrate on these F-16s, and so they kind of took a back seat. But actually Sweden are the ones who are, as you would imagine, the most keen, the keenest, because they are providing their own expertise or their own airframes that then get marketed worldwide, and then people go and buy Gripens, right? So previously, Sweden's Defence Minister Paul Jonsson said that other partners asked Stockholm to wait with possible plans on sending Gripens to Ukraine, as the focus is now on providing F-16s. According to Billström, the Swedish government did not refuse to send Gripens along with F-16 fighter jets from other allies, but Ukraine concluded that adopting 2 aircraft systems simultaneously would be difficult to manage. So this is going back to the idea that actually it wasn't the other F-16 providers, it was actually Ukraine saying this, even though other Ukrainians had since said, no, we're fine with Gripens as well. And you get differing opinions, don't you? And claims. But that doesn't mean that Sweden's not open to continuing with the Gripens if and when the F-16 program is completed. Now, what does it mean to complete that program? I don't know. Kyiv is expected to receive at least 79 F-16s from Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark and Norway. The supposed deadline for completing the F-16 program is unclear, as Belgium plans to continue delivering its planes until 2028, for example. First batch of planes are on their way from the Netherlands and Denmark to Ukraine and will arrive this summer, according to Anthony Blinken. Delivery is expecting to continue in the following years. In late May, Sweden announced the largest military package worth $1.3 billion for Kyiv, which includes 2 ASC-890 radar reconnaissance and control aircraft. So can't wait to see them flying above Ukraine. Poland will not comply with Kyiv's request to shoot down Russian missiles flying towards Ukraine. Poland will not comply with that request on account of what it looks like John Kirby yesterday put paid to that. By the way, lots of people are like, it's John Kirby, not Anthony Blinken. I made a faux pas and called him Anthony Blinken, but I think I did correct myself later in the video. But lots of people are like, it's John Kirby. And someone else, one of you, was like really angry about it. Like, I make mistakes sometimes, and yeah, sorry. The Polish defense minister told the Polish radio that Poland could not make any decisions on this matter on its own, and that this decision must be made by all of NATO. And you can understand this, right? You don't want to unilaterally get involved in helping Ukraine in the war and then get some of your planes shot down, and then you go, oh, come on guys, NATO, we've had some of our planes shot down. NATO goes, well, we didn't ask you to do that. And so yeah, you can understand why they'd say, we'll do this if NATO fully support, but NATO are never going to do that because then it's getting really heavily involved in the war. And so, unfortunately, this looks like a bit of a dead end for something that seems like a really sensible idea, which is Poland helping, certainly in the west of Ukraine, to shoot down Russian missiles and drones that get as far as close enough to the Polish border. Jürgen Naudit says, talks about this. Do you remember how on July the 8th, Zelensky said that a mechanism was being developed for the Poles to shoot down missiles and drones flying in their direction? With a stroke of a pen, Mr. Kirby of the Biden administration presumably put an end to that matter. Today he stated, nobody wants an escalation of this war. We want to find ways to make Ukraine effective, but we don't want an escalation. It wouldn't be good for the Ukrainians. It wouldn't be good for the Poles. It wouldn't be good for anyone. Damned cowards, says Naudit. A well-known German journalist wrote today, NATO is finished. There are lots of people saying that NATO has not been strong enough, has not gone far enough, and as a result, NATO is being sidelined effectively by Russia. Is not fit for purpose, some would argue. Difficult because the more robust you are in responding to Russia, the more involved in the war you become, the more it becomes a war between NATO and Russia. And then finally, goodness me, you say finally, thankfully, this is along the lines of Dragonfire from the UK, and it is another laser that has been developed. Even cheaper to fire by the looks of it. So the UK one's supposed to be £10 a shot. Imagine the thousands of lives saved in Ukraine's allies if the Allies gave these, says Jay in Kiev. South Korean laser-based anti-aircraft weapon. This version is meant for small drones and copters. South Korea admitted that the US and Israel are ahead of them with development of lasers. Interesting, because we've not heard of those two countries. We have heard of the UK not only developing these, but saying they're going to go on UK ships and whatnot, but they're also going straight to Ukraine as well. And the idea is that for the UK, £10 a shot, these are apparently $1.50 is how much it costs to shoot that laser. Whereas think of how much an air defense missile costs. Now, the challenge for these lasers is going to be range. So the UK one is 1 kilometre, can hit a pound coin at a kilometre distance. I don't know what the range is for these, but certainly it is not as useful if the ranges are only a kilometre, but still like crazy useful. You put that near to a sensitive target and you can shoot down FPV drones and reconnaissance drones that get too close for comfort and do that relatively cheaply. So that's the South Korean doing that. Not to say that'll at all end up in Ukraine, but it's kind of what if, and it's going to be great to see if the British Dragonfire will end up being utilised by the Ukrainians. Anyway, that's enough from me. It's a long one today. There was always going to be a lot of military aid news to talk about. Hopefully that was of interest. Really appreciate your support, guys. Take care and speak to you soon.